Chapter 25 of Frank Merriwell's Trust by Burt L. Standish. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 25. Swift declares his passion.
"Oh, I'll bring you down off your high horse, confound you,"
muttered Roy Swift, as he followed Walter Burridge from that room.
"If your sister does not lower her high head in short order, I'll make her do it, or land you behind bars."
Leaving the hotel, he made his way straight toward the house of Alvin Brander on the outskirts of the village. There was a brass knocker on the door of the old-fashioned house, and Swift pounded it vigorously. A servant appeared, and Swift pushed right into the hall, saying,
"Tell Miss Burridge that a friend wishes to see her."
"Will you give me your name?"
"Frank Merriwell."
He was shown into the stiff old parlour, with its haircloth furniture, picture album, case of wax flowers, and chromos on the walls. There he seated himself comfortably and waited. He was not compelled to wait long. On the stair there was a flying footfall, and Inza appeared, her face showing her pleasure, whilst she exclaimed,
"Oh, Frank, I'm so glad you—"
Then, as he rose, she stopped short and stared at him, a look of surprise and consternation on her handsome face.
"Mr. Swift!"
she cried in disappointment.
"Yes,"
he laughed.
"Quite a joke on you, wasn't it?"
She drew herself up proudly, her eyes flashing.
"A joke, sir?"
"Why, yes. You thought you were coming down to see Merriwell. That was a joke."
"I must say you have very peculiar ideas of a joke. You gave a false name."
"Perhaps your servant misunderstood me."
"No, you gave your name as Frank Merriwell. You knew I was engaged caring for my father, and might not find time to come down. It was a trick."
"But you could find time to come down for Merriwell?"
"He is a friend. He saved my life and the life of my father yesterday."
"Which anyone else might have done in his place."
"What did you do?"
"Unfortunately, I was separated from you by the accident, and I could not find you."
"What did you do when you knew my father was back there in that burning wreckage, when I appealed to somebody to save him?"
"I did not know where to find him."
"Nor did Mr. Merriwell."
"I think he did know, else he would not have succeeded so finely."
"He did not."
"He has told you that, to make the act seem all the braver and grander in your eyes. He knows how to play his cards."
Her lips curled.
"I'll not listen to such talk about him. I must return to my father."
"Wait!"
"I cannot stop, sir. You must excuse me."
She was going.
"Miss Burridge, your brother is in great peril."
That stopped her.
"Walter!"
she exclaimed.
"He is in danger?"
"Yes."
"What do you mean?"
"Just what I say."
Now she came back a few steps, and he was satisfied.
"What is the danger?"
she haltingly asked.
"The danger is that he will be arrested. You know for what. And in case he is arrested, he will be tried and condemned. A term of 10 or 20 years must follow."
She had straightened up to hear these words. For a moment she did not speak, and then, in a tone that indicated an effort to self-control, she asked,
"Has he been recognized here in Fairdale?"
"Not yet, but one word from anyone who knows him will set the law on his track."
"From anyone who knows him? Who is there who would betray him? Is it possible that you mean that you—"
He stepped toward her quickly.
"I mean, Miss Burridge, that I love you,"
he declared boldly.
"Wait! You must listen. Understanding your brother's peril, you will not refuse to listen."
She put up a hand to check his advance.
"Mr. Swift,"
she panted.
Is it possible that you are threatening me?
Not that. But I am desperately in love with you, Inza. And I was determined to find a way to make you listen to me.
Brave man.
Her words and her look cut him deeply, but he would not be checked.
I have loved you all the years since I left Fardale. In all my wanderings, I have never found another like you, Inza.
Call me Miss Burridge, if you please, sir.
You can't hold me in check that way. You do not know Roy Swift, else you would not try. I have seen you again, and I find you far handsomer than you were in the old days. My heart is torn with love, and I have sworn that you shall be mine.
He was shaking with the intensity of his feelings. In his bronzed cheeks there was a wild flush, while his eyes gleamed with a burning light. Inza was alarmed, but she did not show it.
You had better withdraw your oath,
She calmly said.
for I shall never be yours. You have fancied something that is quite impossible.
You must! You shall!
He cried.
I will not give you up to Frank Merriwell. He shall not have you. Inza, when my grandfather dies, I shall be a rich man. I do not have to enter the army. I do that of my own accord. I shall be able to give you anything you want if you will marry me.
Mr. Swift, I would not marry you if you had all the wealth of Rockefeller.
I swear you shall never marry him. I am desperate, Inza. Think of your brother. With a word, I can send him to prison.
And prove yourself a dastard.
A man in love will do anything to win the object of his passions. If you would save your brother, you shall marry me.
You coward.
She took a step toward him, her hands clenched, and hissed the words through her white teeth. He actually fell back a step before her intense scorn and contempt.
Then you are willing to see him branded as a criminal? Willing to see him suffer? His arrest will be the death blow of your old father. Think of that. Are you willing to sacrifice yourself to save both your brother and your father? Have you not that much love for them?
You coward.
She repeated, withering scorn in her dark eyes.
If my brother were here now.
But he is not, nor is Frank Merriwell here. You do not know the passion you have awakened in the heart of Roy Swift. If Merriwell are out of the way, by heaven, he may be out of the way.
Would you?
Let him keep away from me. I go armed, and I will not hold myself responsible. If Merriwell were here now...
He is.
Frank himself strode into the room. He had come to the house with young Jim Brander, who had let him in without ringing. In the hall, Mary had heard what was passing in the parlour, and there was a terrible look on his face as he strode toward the soldier. Swift leaped backwards, his right hand jerking out a pistol. With a spring, Frank was on him, grasped his wrist and wrenched the weapon from his hand.
I think you have been drinking this morning, sir,
he cried grimly, as he held the other helpless and turned toward the door.
Jim, fling open the front door.
Jim Brander, who had been peering into the room, hastened to obey. Mary quickly carried the resisting fellow from the parlour, saying as he did so,
You have made some very nasty threats, Swift, but you had better think twice before you attempt to carry any of them out. And if you annoy Miss Burridge again, I'll thrash you till you'll need a doctor for a week.
Then, having reached the front door, he proceeded to kick Roy Swift down the steps. End of chapter 25. Chapter 26 of Frank Merriwell's Trust by Burt L. Standish. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 26. Happy Hearts. Humiliated and infuriated, Roy Swift left, swearing vengeance. As soon as he got back to the hotel, he took to drink. He seemed in a great hurry to fill himself with whisky, and as he grew intoxicated, still wilder schemes began to revolve in his head.
"I'll be even with Merriwell,"
he vowed.
"He shall not have her. I swear it."
He was one of the kind that grow desperate as they become intoxicated. In a disgraceful condition, he hunted up Walter, who as yet knew nothing of the affair at Brander's.
"Bridge,"
said Swift,
"I'm going to marry your sister."
Walter looked at him a moment and then said,
"Swift, you are disgustingly drunk. I advise you to get into a room and stay there till you sober off."
"Don't need your advice. I'm going to marry your sister. That is business. I swear by everything high and low that I will have her. Frank Merriwell shall not."
Then he turned and made off. That afternoon Inza left the house to go to the post office. Within 10 rods of the door, she was startled to hear the hoof-beats of a horse behind her. Turning quickly, she saw Roy Swift, mounted on a bay horse, coming straight toward her, his face flushed and his eyes gleaming. She tried to get out of the way, but she could not avoid him. She thought he meant to run her down and trample her beneath the feet of the horse, but he swerved aside, bent from the saddle, caught her up somehow and flung her across the horse before him. Then, in this manner, holding her helpless, the intoxicated fellow went tearing through the village, yelling like a wild Indian. Frank was with Walter Burridge when Swift passed the hotel. Mary saw him and dashed out to the street. In front of the hotel, a horse was hitched, being harnessed into a sleigh. Out came Mary's knife, and with wonderful swiftness he cut that horse clear from the sleigh. Onto its back he flung himself, starting in pursuit of the liquor-maddened kidnapper. It was a wild race through the village and out into the country beyond. From the top of a hill, Fardale Academy and the buildings surrounding it might have been seen, but neither pursued nor pursuer looked in that direction. Frank found that Swift was drawing away, the horse on which he was mounted being far superior to the animal Mary had appropriated. In vain Frank urged on the horse he bestrode. Then he saw the intoxicated kidnapper turn from the regular road into a road that led down to a little lake where some ice cutters had been at work. They had made the road hauling ice to the village where it was stored. In his delirium, Swift had mistaken this as the main highway. When Mary reached that point, the bay horse was tearing down toward the lake. Frank pursued now with a hope that something might happen to baffle Swift. Out onto the ice-covered lake rode the kidnapper. He did not seem to see the spot where the men had been cutting ice, and dashed straight into it. The thin ice crashed through beneath the feet of the horse, and it plunged into the water. Then Frank Merriwell madly urged his own horse down the hill. When the lake was reached, he flung himself from the animal's back and dashed to the edge of the opening in the ice. Inza was clinging to the horse, which was keeping its head above the surface. Swift had disappeared. The solid ice ran close to the spot where the horse had plunged through, and Frank soon succeeded in getting hold of Inza and helping her out. That evening Inza received Frank at Alvin Brander's. The facts of her last thrilling adventure had been carefully kept from her father, who was resting easily. Inza herself had been sorely shaken, but her brave spirit kept her up, and her healthy body had made it possible for her to endure it all without being overcome. Indeed, to Frank it seemed that she looked more charming than ever. She shuddered when she thought of the fate of Roy Swift. Somehow Frank was uneasy. He could not seem to bring himself to speak of the things which sought utterance.
Inza,
he said.
do you think you dare venture out this evening? It is a beautiful night and not very cold.
Yes,
she said.
I believe it will make me feel better.
So a little later they were walking together, her gloved hand resting on his arm. The white moon looked down at them and smiled, while the knowing little stars winked wisely at each other. Frank's heart was strangely full. Still, something sealed his lips.
This is our street,
said Inza as they turned down the old familiar way.
You know we used to live down here a short distance?
How well he knew it.
I wish you were living here now, Inza, and that I was a cadet at the academy.
Would you like to live the old days over, Frank?
Would I? They were the happiest days of my life.
And of mine.
They came to the old home and paused where they could see it as revealed by the moonlight.
It needs repairing,
she said sadly.
I hear it is for sale. The people who lived here have moved away, and it is empty.
A strange fancy came to him.
I believe I will buy it,
he exclaimed.
Oh, do!
She cried.
That would be just splendid!
Would you like to live here again, Inza?
Nothing in this wide world could make me happier.
Nothing, Inza?
Her head drooped. After a moment she murmured.
Well, I did not mean just that, Frank.
Here is the old gate,
he said, drawing her toward it.
Don't you remember a certain evening years ago when we stood here by the gate?
I shall never forget it,
she declared, slipping from him and passing through to the other side.
I was in here, and you out there, just as we are now.
And it was a beautiful moonlight night, but the trees had leaves on them and cast a shadow here, so that the moon could not see what happened that night.
She laughed in spite of the fact that her heart was beating very fast.
Inza,
he went on.
You were my sweetheart then, and now I know I have loved you ever since. Inza, dearest, do you love me? Will you marry me when I leave college?
The moment had come. She felt herself shaking all over. Her voice was not steady as she asked in a very low tone.
Are you certain, Frank, that you love me more than anyone else in the world? More than Elsie?
I have not the least doubt of it. I now know that I have always loved you more than anyone in the world.
Then I will marry you, Frank.
There being no baffling leaves on the trees, the delighted old moon this time saw what it had failed to see one moonlight evening over that gate years ago. End of chapter 26. End of Frank Merriwell's Trust by Burt L. Standish.